Hi, my name is Eleni, and today we're going to talk about emotional contagion. Now, why? Why bother? Emotional contagion is something that I drew this sophisticatedly. So let's say we have three people on a team. Two feel good, so they reinforce each other. One is not so happy, but they reinforce each other anyway. So in other words, we all, quote unquote, catch each other's emotions at varying intensities. So let's say most people are happy. Happiness is likely to, overcome sadness if this happiness is stronger than the sadness. But if this person's sadness is stronger than their happiness, that emotion will win. So it's like which energy of the emotion is stronger, that is the one that will prevail in a group or a team. It's a little bit scary because you could have one person, 50 people who are, happy, and one person sad, but that person's sadness or anger or frustration or disgust or resentment, whatever the emotion is, could, be kind of get to everyone depending on where they are within a hierarchy. So let's say you work in a very hierarchical organization, the boss is negative. Have you noticed, or can you imagine how everyone else will feel? They come home, they come to work happy, and they're like, oh no, another problem, or and they get depressed within 2 seconds. So that's what happens. It could also be the other way. So this is what's called emotional contagion. So there's a quote, unwanted level of it that one person could influence a lot, or there's a positive when one person could influence a lot, depending on which way we go. So that's emotional contagion, and that's something is influencing you and your team, whether we acknowledge it or not. In the last numerous decades, we've ignored this. We've said, let's keep emotions at the door. Don't bring your problems to work. Don't bring your dog to work. Don't bring your pictures from home. Leave everything outside of work and your productivity and your logic outside. Well, since the 60s and 70s, where we got reconnected to our inner selves, and now more and more we want purpose, we want meaning. That means we need our emotions, because we can't have purpose without feeling it, without feeling good, without feeling empowered. And so this is, a time where we're getting reconnected as people to our emotions, which affects how we are at work. So I don't know if you noticed this, but one of the things that have changed in the organizational context includes feedback. Younger people want more frequent feedback and more types of feedback than people who have accepted this in the past. In the past, people accepted performance reviews once per year. No discussion about it throughout the year, and they assumed and they accepted that as enough. But more and more people want it as an ongoing basis. Why? So they can feel good. They can feel like, am I on the right path? Am I going where my boss or my organization sees fit? Do I feel good doing it? Does it have meaning and purpose? And so the feelings have become now included in our work environment because we want to bring our entire selves to work. More and more people are rejecting the idea that we are replaceable cogs in a wheel who only perform and get things done. And more people want to be treated with respect and dignity as people with emotions, with ideas, with logic, with great collaboration, all of ourselves. So that means we as leaders and we as team members, we need to behave differently. We need to acknowledge that this is happening and understand what it affects, because this doesn't affect only the mood, it affects the performance and the outcomes of the behavior. So if we go back to our beloved, triad, and if you haven't seen this, you could find them in other videos, the thought, feeling, behavior, we always have certain thoughts. So if we want to feel good or calm or resourceful, we need certain thoughts, and that will affect our feelings. If we then have, we feel sad or frustrated or resentful. And if you think your team members have never or will never feel these, you could consider it. Let's say we feel sad, frustrated, resentful. We're having completely different thoughts and behavior and therefore outcomes. So what we do often with human-centric leading, we tally as a sidebar, we tally people's triads and then say, okay, most people here feel resentful. You're not going to get really creative outcomes. So we need to change that in order to get better outcomes. So this emotional contagion affects performance because it affects how we think and what we do, and therefore what we get. So what we could do is use at least a couple of the human-centric leading tools. One is use the emotions as data. Say, okay, if we're sad and frustrated, there's a reason. We don't have these out of the blue, I come to work, I'm frustrated or I'm resentful randomly. Something I thought or something has happened in the environment that brings that up in me. Yes, we could go and rationalize that it triggers something that happened 30 years ago. We don't need to go there because usually an emotion that's triggered in the moment is coming from the environment in the moment. And so we could use it as that type of data. And so then we say, okay, let's say we're frustrated. We named it. Naming it releases some of the intensity of the emotions, and you can already feel better. Then you say, okay, decode it. What does frustration mean? It means I want this and I'm getting that. So I'm not happy, I'm frustrated. If that happens, I want this and I'm getting that. That could mean I get angry over time. So frustrated is a lesser version of anger, which then goes to rage. Okay, so you can imagine why people at work can be angry and rageful. Resentful is another variation of anger. So it means something unfair has happened. And we see that all the time at work. And people say, no, life is not fair. But more and more of us want to seek a fair and just working environment. So we could say, oh, we all have one thing and want another, or want one thing and get another. What do we do? How do we respond to it? How do we respect it as a piece of data and say, okay, yeah, we all feel this way. We're all frustrated. And as a coach, I learned that some of these emotions are felt very commonly. Anger, frustration, anxiety, fear of making mistakes, fear of being seen badly, being criticized or blamed. These are very common, which turn into resentment. So if you look at it and say, okay, how do I respond to that logic? If something unfair has happened, how do we respond to it? What would we ask instead of complain? What might we need? We can use another one of the toolkits, basic needs. Do I need to feel more certain or safe in this environment? Do I need to have more engagement, variety? Do I need something to help me develop? We can look at what do we need to feel like this is fair? What would make it fair? You see? So it's a very simple and easy approach once you get the hang of it. So you don't have to do any lengthy assessment of the situation. You could say, okay, you see people feel badly. That is an indication that something's out of balance because we are wired for joy. We are wired to be neutral and happy and resourceful. We're not wired to be miserable and resentful and anxious. That's not a natural set point. So when we see those feelings, you're like, okay, something's off. What is it? Decode it, respond to it. What do we need? And you can say, what do you need to feel resourceful? Or if somebody's frustrated, what do you need to not feel frustrated or to feel like okay? What do you need if you're resentful to feel like that's been resolved? And people know. And if they need a few minutes, it's okay. They can think about it. But you don't need to see, how do you feel? How does that feel? You don't have to go there. You could always say, what do you need to make the situation, resourceful or balanced or easy for you then to do your job or solve a problem. And that makes it really easy. And so going into emotions and facing emotional contagion does not need to be dramatic, or you don't need to have a PhD in psychology, or you don't need to be a coach. You can do it by learning these toolkits and learning how to, thank you, use them in ways that are simple and can deal with the basic issues at hand. Because we humans are magnificent in our ways of being both simple, that's simple, and some truths go through us and we respond to certain truths, and we're complicated, or we are let's say more complicated as well as the way we adapt to environments and adapt to challenges we are faced with. So this is one video, and if you want to take it on a personal level, what you could do is you can think about how you feel as either a leader of a team or a team member when you notice how you change, if you notice it, or how you see other people feel, and how that makes you feel, and then therefore think differently and behave differently. And you can start to question, how do I use those tools to help me influence the environment if it's going on a way that you feel is depressing or unresourceful? How can I influence it to bring us all up, instead of just me get away or avoid talking about it, or try to escape and work from home and things like that? So it's like facing it and using it as a tool and as information to solve the challenges at hand, to curate a culture that feels good, and from that people can think in more resourceful ways and behave in different ways, and therefore get better outcomes.